So, do you think your experience of the pandemic has changed the way you view the world? We've all had our experiences, whether they were good or bad, but we all were in it together in some way or another. There was that analogy, same storm, but in a different boat. Well, all this week on BBC Radio Wiltshire, we're meeting people who shared their stories of the pandemic in a new book called Unlocked: Portraits of the Pandemic. It's been put together by local writer Millie Stone. And one of the stories is about Becky Harrison, who's from Swindon. Everything changed for Becky when she lost her sight during 2020. And she's been telling me her story of the pandemic.
I was a pastoral lead in a local primary school, and I was a key worker. So I was going into work, working with vulnerable children throughout the pandemic, and as was my husband, who also works in a school, and we've got 3 children of our own, so we're sort of balancing the homeschooling and being key workers, so it was a lot to deal with. And on top of that, I had some sort of niggling headaches, thought, I just need to get a new prescription, kept putting it off like you do, especially during the pandemic, because lots of things were closed. And then went to the opticians. They did a scan of my eyes and found sort of an abnormality on the screen, and then said, I think we need to refer you to the hospital. Ended up attending the hospital and got some pretty devastating news, really, and just completely out of the blue. Wasn't expecting it. Didn't have any major eye health problems before. I was always short-sighted from when I was little, but never anything that would warrant any concern. And sort of my whole life changed, really, within one appointment.
So from a few niggling headaches to being told you were losing your sight, and how long before you lost it?
By the August, I was registered partially sighted. I lost my driver's licence at that appointment. The following August, I was registered blind. It means that I can't read, print, I can't see faces, I can't see the television screen, I can't see the cinema, I can't read signs, and I can't navigate life really on my own now. I have to have a lot of more help, and had to relearn how to do everything you take for granted, from making a cup of tea to getting dressed, really. I mean, everything changed really in an instant.
And how difficult, it sounds a ridiculous question, but how difficult has it been for you to adjust to that? You have 3 children, you're married, you're working in a school. How challenging has it been for you to come to terms with losing your sight?
It's been really difficult, and I don't think I have come to terms with it, and I think it's probably going to take years to sort of get my head around it still. I had to stop work, so I don't work anymore, and I guess just everyday things like being a mum is different now. When your children are constantly saying, Mum, can you look at this? Mum, can you do this? And, school plays and sports days. And, it becomes a real difficult challenge each day to manage and negotiate and navigate your way around things, but also mentally preparing yourself, I guess, for disappointment, I suppose, because each day that passes, there's a new thing that I've not encountered because it's so new. Christmas and things like that, when you're thinking, I'm not going to be able to see my Christmas presents when I open them, or the children's faces when they open their presents, and things that you just really take for granted. You don't expect not to be able to see those things, and then when it happens, it's just such a big shock, culture shock, not understanding social cues anymore, and people having conversations with people and then finish the conversation or walked away, and you're still chatting away thinking that somebody's still listening to you. It's so much. I think it's probably one of the disabilities where it's just so life-changing. You just really don't realise how much you rely on your sight for everything you do, from your mobility to your to your relationships, to your friendships, to your work, to everything that you do in life, really. So I think I'm still learning, and I don't think it's ever going to sink in because there's so many things that I haven't experienced. But I guess that kind of spurs me on to say, I want to keep experiencing things and keep pushing myself to be as independent as I possibly can, but also to keep experiencing things. And even with sight loss, and I've tried loads of exciting things since the pandemic.
Becky Harrison from Swindon there, who lost her sight during 2020 at the very start of the pandemic. Her story is told in a new book written by Swindon author Millie Stone. It's called Unlocked, Portraits of the Pandemic, and we'll hear how Becky has been getting on since lockdown in just a few minutes' time here on BBC Radio Wiltshire.
Sue Kinnear, BBC Radio Wiltshire.
But we have been hearing stories of people, their experiences of the pandemic and whether or not their experience changed the way they viewed the world. We've been meeting people who've told their story in a new book, Unlocked, Portraits of the Pandemic, by local author Millie Stone. We've heard a little earlier from Becky Harrison from Swindon, her story of how her day-to-day life was turned on its head when she was registered blind. Becky told me how that experience changed her as a person and changed everything she's doing now.
Before the pandemic, I trained as a social worker. I was a qualified social worker, and I was working in schools, but thinking, long term that I was going to maybe go back into social work and do something related to that. And that's completely shifted now. And I changed my expectations of what I can and can't achieve, and you have to be realistic about job opportunities and things for disabled people, but you also have to be realistic about what you can actually do on your own. So things do have to change, and that is really hard to get your head around. But it doesn't mean that life has to stop. It just means that you have a different look on it and a different take on things. And I'm so lucky that I've recently found a focus in Swindon Bats, which is a social and leisure group for people with visual impairments. And they have been absolutely wonderful. They run a 10-pin bowling league for blind and visually impaired people. And it's recognised by British Blind Sport. And I'm now a league 10-pin bowling player. I mean, yeah. I would never in a million years have imagined that that's where I would be at. But, they're a fantastic group of people who experience the same things as me. And having that connection to other people that have sight loss is so important, because that aligns your goals and your aspirations with other people who know exactly what you're experiencing and what you're going through. So that's been a lifeline, really.
It's great to hear you've got that lifeline. But why did you want to tell your story in this book? Why was that important to you?
Well, I guess when Millie approached me, it was just really about awareness for sight loss, because I just think it's something that can happen and does happen to everybody and anybody. And I think a lot of people in my family and friend circle said, when I lost my sight, well, I've never met a blind person before. And it was such an alien thing. And now obviously everybody's getting used to it. And you still get people popping up to me and sort of waving at me and going, oh gosh, I'm so sorry, I forgot. Because it's not such a visible thing, but it's such a life-changing thing to happen to somebody. But it could happen to anybody. Anybody could contract a condition or lose their sight through diabetes or any sorts of things, or old age, macular degeneration. And we really take our senses for granted. And I just kind of wanted to raise awareness of that and bring it to the forefront, really, because I don't think anybody sort of talks about it. And I think that's kind of where I was at with the pandemic as well, being so isolated. When everything became lifted, people sort of didn't want to talk about it because they obviously felt that it would be too upsetting for me to speak about. But actually, I would rather people come up and talk to me about it. I would rather people ask questions, and I would rather not ignore the elephant in the room. And actually, yeah, I like to make jokes now and make the best of it, because it's part of who I am. And actually, part of me wouldn't change that, because I am a different person now. And I think I appreciate a lot more about life and a lot more about the people that I meet in life. And I just really wanted that opportunity to share that experience with others.
Inspiring, isn't she? Becky Harrison from Swindon, who lost her sight at the very beginning of the pandemic. She's now registered blind. Quite a powerful story she has told in that book written by local author Millie Stone. It's called Unlocked: Portraits of the Pandemic, and we'll be hearing another story from that book tomorrow. It's the story of Rich Loveday, a boxing promoter who developed a dangerous gambling habit during lockdown. We'll be hearing from him about the same time on BBC Radio Wiltshire tomorrow morning.
Sue Kinnear.